I don't think there is this one leadership style which makes you successful through your entire career in every situation. Every time you change the role, right, you gain a new perspective. I strongly believe it's not about female versus male. It's about women becoming mothers. It is kind of interesting to lead in a really deep crisis because then things become very clear and fast.
Welcome to another episode of Banking on Success. On behalf of Raiffeisen Bank International, I'm happy to welcome you today. Here with me is Eliza Kavakova,
Group Head Institutional Clients,
and Daniel Rath. And today we are happy to have the CEO of Austrian Airlines with us, Annette Mann. Warm welcome.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking your time. We directly jump into, I think most of our visitors and listeners know you. Probably not everybody knows where you're coming from and also a little bit of history. I was surprised to see that you had a quite intensive career in Lufthansa Group, basically. You were born in Simbach am Inn. You will tell us then exactly where and how it is and how it was also to grow up there. Studied business administration in Ingolstadt, as well as earned an executive MBA from Kellogg School of Management. You've spent your career in Lufthansa Group, which I'm curious then also to see how you see Lufthansa internally, as well as finally 2022, January, you moved into Austrian Airlines, a subsidiary, also formerly state-owned entity here in Austria. So warm welcome. Probably I would be interested to see what are the most interesting stations of your career, and also how did you develop from Lufthansa, the headquarter, into now a subsidiary, taking care of this and the development of Austrian.
Yeah, let's do that.
Great. If you look at your history, I think airline business, we heard before and we discussed already, is not a female business as well. Was this a dream of yours always to be in the airline industry, or did it develop out of curiosity or other areas that you have thought about?
It was actually quite a coincidence. It was never planned. So from my family, there was no connection to aviation whatsoever. And as you said, I grew up in Simbach, which is directly at the border to Austria. So Braunau would be the other side of the border. So at that time, growing up in the 80s, 90s, there was no internet, right? Munich was the next bigger town, but it was already 120 kilometers away. And so when I did my A-levels, it was all about first finding out what is there out in life. So I didn't have any plan. And I was a bit hesitant, should I go into the business direction, or I could also imagine to do more of science. So I did my A-levels also in chemistry. That would have been the other path. But in the end, I decided for business because I thought, I have no clue with my 19 years then what could be out there. And I felt that would make me most flexible. And so during my studies, it was all about trying different types of jobs. So I tried small companies, large companies, different industries. And so the first time I was really caught by something, that was when I spent time at BMW. And at that time, BMW had just bought the brand Mini and launched it as a new car. And that was quite exciting. And at that time, it was about that I realized that I wanted to be with a cool brand. I also was more tempted to be in a B2C business. And but still, I was fascinated by technology, and bringing this together, this was what I liked at BMW. So I thought I wanted to go into automotive. But when I then finally finished my studies, there were in a crisis. And so it was a total coincidence. I looked into other trainee programs because that is, again, how I wanted to start a career. And then Lufthansa showed up. And it was an amazing program. And so this was the reason why I joined. And I never left. because from then on, it was always quite exciting and interesting, and it didn't take long for me to be really fascinated by aviation. It's a tough business, but it's also quite an exciting business, and here I am.
Maybe catching up on what you've mentioned, starting with a trainee program, is there something out of this period of the trainee time which still guides you even now when you're at the top of the company?
Why I wanted to do a trainee program was because I was quite aware that joining a large company, it is quite tough to get good perspective, and there's so many different kinds of jobs and expertises, right? And so it was a fantastic time with project work to just try to understand as much as possible what's the business kind of like, right? And that time showed me that every time you change the role, right, you gain a new perspective, and it widens your perspective. And there's never this one truth. And so this guided me a lot over my career, always when I made a decision, what could be my next job, that I always wanted to kind of collect different perspectives. And you said before, well, there was now more than 20 years of Korean Lufthansa, and I always tried to be once in headquarters, then out in the markets in sales, for example, in strategic positions, in operations positions, in projects. And so with all that kinds of different roles, this gives you more and more perspectives and a more holistic view of the business. And probably that's also what brought me then finally in that kind of position, collecting these different perspectives.
I can fully resonate. And what also now, Daniel, if you allow me one more question. You've mentioned you've been at BMW when they launched Mini. You've launched, if I'm not totally mistaken, the premium economy at Austrian. Although actually I don't see an advertisements. There is another airline making adverts with the premium economy. But were there big challenges when launching the premium economy? So what were the lessons out of this experience?
It was probably, the time when I, again, learned a lot about how the business runs, because implementing premium economy, the tough thing was not sourcing some new seats and putting them into an airplane. But the thing was, how do you launch a kind of new product line between two others? And when you compare that, and I used that example a lot, the challenge was to convince Lufthansa at that point of time, no matter of management, but also lots of colleagues, that there is room for something between economy and business class. And because so many people were afraid if we launched something, it could dilute business class. And business class at that point of time was always the most profitable product line, and airlines being very reliable and very, very dependent on that. And at the same time, not too many people believed, because economy is kind of a price-driven business, right, that there would be enough people paying more for premium economy. And so, discussing these beliefs and also changing these beliefs that there is room. I used the example of cars, where I said, look, pretending that there's no room for premium economy would be a bit like BMW says there's no space between the 3 Series and the 7 Series, right? And there is a lot in between.
There is, indeed.
And so I actually used that BMW example when implementing premium economy. And in the end, it was successful. And it taught me a lot, because it was about the strategic business case, but then also about how do you implement that in a commercially right way? How do you get the pricing right, the marketing right? How do you find the right target groups for this product in between? How do you attract enough people from economy? And how do you hold enough people back jumping down from business class? But in the end, it worked out.
And now grabbing on that and switching a bit gears, because, leaving now the business case aside of the premium economy, this required a lot of convincing skills and many other skills to bring, to change the mindset. How would you define your leadership style?
Yeah, I get that question quite often, and I would say I try to adapt it to situations, and I try to adapt it also to people. I don't think there is this one leadership style which makes you successful through your entire career in every situation. Because, well, over more than 20 years, in aviation, there's always times where there's growth and where everything is booming, right? And then there we had, on the other hand, we had deep crises. I mean, Corona for sure was the deepest crisis and the most existential one. And in that times, you need a different kind of leadership style than while implementing something new like premium economy. And the other thing is when you lead people, I'm sure we will also talk about diversity, right? I always try to have a diverse team, not just in terms of men, women, but also in types of character. And if you have someone who's really new in a leadership position, probably that person needs a different kind of leadership style than someone who's super experienced and probably like on the way to the next career level. And so I try to be sensitive on what's needed. And over time, I tried different kinds of leadership styles. It's probably more the question, what do I like most? It's probably a bit surprising. I like more the extremes. So there could be. It is kind of interesting to lead in a really deep crisis because then things become very clear and fast. So that's something that does fit me. But the other thing is like developing something new, building something new. That's very much my passion, and so that's probably something where I try to also let others feel my passion and then try to get energy into the system. That's what I really do like. But yeah, you have to just be adaptive, I believe.
Yeah, fully agree.
One last probably on your career development. You explained successful development 20 years in Lufthansa, kind of the headquarters. What motivated you to come to Austrian and basically subsidiary? It's here with us also in Raiffeisen. There's a difference if you are here in Vienna at the headquarters, if you are in a network bank in Central Eastern Europe, different perspective, different approaches, also different how a group is steered. This is Raiffeisen typical. Other areas that we've seen have different views. What is also the difference strategically, organizational, culture-wise, a little bit on Austrian? How do you see that?
Well, actually, I spent very little time in the formal headquarter. So I started with Lufthansa Airlines. So I was deep in the airline business. And then I also, for example, spent 2 years out in the field, in sales in Hamburg. And then also in 2015, I went to Zurich and already spent 5 years in Swiss. And so it is not the first time for me to be kind of out in a business unit. And what I always enjoyed is the jumping forth and back, because then we're back to perspectives, right? And I think it is super important in upper management roles to understand both, right? To understand what's needed from a headquarter perspective, but also to understand what's needed to be a successful business unit. And so I try to play that out. And do I have when I would have to choose what do I enjoy more? I would really say it's hard. It's when you're in the one role, I can very much identify now being here and being responsible for a business unit. But I also enjoyed my headquarter roles. I mean, it's a huge wheel you can drive, right? And that also has quite its fascination, and it depends. And I like to be switching. Yeah.
Several brands in Lufthansa Group still. I guess there will be also kind of competition between the airlines or also benchmarking in that respect. Also from outside, there's a lot of change, low-cost carriers coming in, destroying the market most probably. How and where do you position Austrian in that respect? How do you see it now, and also strategically going forward within not only Lufthansa but overall in Central Eastern Europe in our markets where we operate?
Yes, we have a lot of brands, and it it changed a bit from being competitors. That was the case for many years, and it becomes more and more collaborative because the understanding is, well, we have to stick together and we have to act as a team and as a family in order to, be competitive out there in the world. I mean, especially aviation in Europe has become really a tough business. Why? Because, over the last 20 years, yes, there was the rise of the low-cost carriers with a totally different business model, super successful. So I admire that a lot. That's very professional. But it's very different to a network airline, and so that has given us a hard time. And the other thing is, I mean, the Americans are really strong, but especially the Gulf carriers and Turkish Airlines. I mean, these countries, they have really understood that aviation is a strategic industry where they can drive their also location factors, right? And also the Chinese are really aggressively getting into the market. So the competition is out there and not within the group. And that's, I think, really a basic belief which we have to have. And so, yes, we benchmark each other, but very much these days to better understand what can I learn from each other, which is great. Where do I see Austrian there? Austrian is probably the brand which stands most for hospitality and warmth and warm-heartedness, and also is operationally extremely successful. So we're super stable. We have really high punctuality ratings, all that. And so people really like, so when we look at our customers and how they rate us, we have always very high scores. The downside of Austrian is a bit that we operate here in a market which is quite tough. Yes, Vienna is a big city, but there's little industry. There's not many global headquarters where there would be a lot of business travel, right? So it's a lot of tourists, and we have by far the highest share of low-cost competition at our hub. So we're at about 30%. All the other hubs in Lufthansa Group, it's more like single-digit. And so that gives us a hard time to really reach the level of profitability that is actually needed and expected within the group. So again, quality is really high, but we're always challenged on our profitability.
Not because you're here, but I can confirm the quality is great. So I really love to travel. The both of us are traveling quite a lot, Central Eastern Europe, and there is 99% of Austrian going there. And I think hospitality is your cabin crews are great. Whichever day and time we are boarding there, there's everybody's super friendly.
And I was about, because you've mentioned the CEO. At least I always connected Austrian with the airline for Central and Eastern Europe. Also because in my coverage I was, and I'm still very often traveling, and you've mentioned the competition of the other airlines like Turkish and others. This is now a question of maybe personal curiosity. So regionally, what is Austrian standing for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we still have a very, very strong footprint in Southeast Europe, of course. And we also now, after Corona, we again want to strengthen that and very much looking into that. Basically, when you look at our network, it's 360 in Europe, right? You can't just focus on one area. And of course, in summer, it's a very touristic portfolio all over the Mediterranean, very strong traffic streams, for example, to Spain, but also to Greece. But for example, also now the Nordics are coming. And so we always have to look into opportunities. And there's some backbones like Southeast Europe, and always opportunities you just have to take. When it comes to long haul, the focus is clearly on the North Atlantic routes. Why? Because this is quite good business. And also in the joint venture with United, that's strong business for the whole Lufthansa group, and also quite good business. And it becomes more and more difficult to fly to the east because of the competition with carriers where it becomes more and more tough to compete because they have totally different frameworks. If you look into Turkey, right, they want to push aviation, and they do everything for aviation.
Very much state-driven as well, policy to enter the market.
Absolutely. And so in Europe over the last few years, it was a lot about how can we tax aviation more and how can we make the life of aviation harder. Just from one year to the other, just to give you a figure, with the new regulation, just from 24 now to 25, we have 43 million euros higher cost just out of the SAF mandate and the ETS, which got more strict, while we had a result of 76 million euros. So, it's nearly 2/3 of our profit, right? Which is just additional cost now from one year to the other, just out of EU regulation. And that's something, and that's just one piece of regulation, and that's just something Turkish or also the Gulf carriers, they don't have, rather the opposite. They get a lot of support. And this makes it super difficult to fly to the east. And so to the west, this is a bit less because, yes, there are people who are actually from Central Europe first fly to Istanbul to then go via the Atlantic. That is happening quite often. But still, it's not the majority. And so this is why it's easier to go to the west.
Thanks for this explanation. Important also for my team, because many of my relationship managers often claim they want to fly Austrian. There are no direct flights in South, speaking about Central Asia. We need to use other airlines, but now I understand what is the also economic background of it. Well, speaking about traveling and pricing, we know, and I see it also myself when I travel, particularly the younger generation as well, wants also to travel sustainably. At the same time, the travelers want cheap prices. So how Austrian is managing this very tiny balance between sustainability and affordability?
First of all, I would say these are two very different topics, because people say they want to fly more sustainably, 80+%. But when you really look into how they make their decision, that's very different. And it's a very tiny single-digit percentage of people who actually make their decision based on sustainability. And that's a challenge. Yeah. So everyone talks about it, but hardly anyone, and in the end, really wants to travel sustainably. However, still, we have a responsibility, and aviation, of course, has to become greener. And so what we do, and that's long back to 2011, is Lufthansa was actually the first airline which was using sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. So Lufthansa was part of doing all the certification that actually you can blend it in with about 2,000 flights between Hamburg and Frankfurt. So we were at the very forefront of pushing all that development for sustainable fuel. And this is still going on with commitments, with partnerships, with having things like green fares. So if you want to make a sustainable choice, there are opportunities, not just short haul, but also long haul. We have developed solutions for business customers. So when business customers, when they want to reduce their scope 3 emissions for their duty travel, right, they can do deals with us where they use SAF for their duty travel, and they'll also get certificates for their papers to actually prove it. And so we try to develop products for these people who actually make their decision based on sustainability. But the truth also is doing that on a broad base, like doing it for every single traveler, every ticket, that's still not what the market wants. Yeah.
Still, you aim and also communicate it to be CO2 neutral by 2050. Which steps are you taking in order to come to that goal, which is a quite ambitious one for all of us, I guess?
Yeah. So one of the let's be systematic. So you have, as an airline, only 3 measures to reduce your CO2 footprint, right? The one thing is you can buy new airplanes, because every new airplane on average uses about 20% less fuel, and that's a huge measure. And
but a costly one, I guess.
It's a costly one, but in Austrian it depends a bit on how quickly the manufacturers deliver.
Sure.
But the plan is still that by 2030 we have 50% latest generation aircraft. So let's see, that does already a lot. The second thing is you can fly more efficiently, so using less fuel. And it's a bit like with your car, right? You can drive your car in a way that you use a lot of fuel, or you can drive your car that you're really saving on fuel. And it's kind of the same with airplanes. And there's some things the pilots can do themselves, and there's some things you can do only together with air traffic control. It's about how fast do you ascend and descend, at which flight levels do you fly, all these things, and how direct do you fly. And with these measures, you could, in Europe, have another 10% efficiency. So if the European countries would work closer together in their air traffic control, this would give about another 10% of fuel efficiency. But it's quite political, and it's tough to actually reach that, to be honest. Third thing is you use sustainable aviation fuel instead of fossil fuel. And these 3 things together, you can come down from your CO2. Will it be at 0 in 2050? We don't believe so. And that was never the promise. Being neutral is then how can you compensate somewhere else.
Okay.
And there we're looking both into where can you kind of compensate with measures that are already there, but we're also looking into carbon capture, for example. Is that something which you can use? And also there are first partnerships, for example, with carbon capture on Iceland. There's some first plans of carbon capture, and we're exploring that as one of the measures.
I was shortly thinking, because you've mentioned, and I will switch now again gears. And you were right that I will raise the question of diversity. In fact, you're one of the few female CEOs in the aviation industry. So number one question from my end would be, how would you effectively support the diversity within the company? And the second question, it's kind of becoming very personal for me. There are many ladies, young ladies out there who have the skills, who would also have the ambition to climb the career ladder. But at a certain point of time, they start hesitating, in a sense. If I go up, I will not have the chance to, care of family, or the way how the society is expecting them. So they feel pressured by the expectations. What would you tell such young female talents who have the skills, who also want, but they stop themselves in, being afraid of not being able to combine the private and the career life?
Yeah. To your first question, I strongly believe diversity is so much more than male, female. So when I look into diversity in Austrian, we're not just talking male, female, but also your background in terms of nationality, your background in terms of, is there a good mix of ages? Is there a good mix of characters? Is there a good mix of educational backgrounds? All these things. Because I think this is true diversity and not just the male-female thing. I think it's really too much narrowed down. And all of these kinds of diversity are important. To the females, I strongly believe it's not about female versus male. It's about, and you mentioned that, women becoming mothers. Because I do believe as long as if you're only a female without kids, right? I think your chances have never been better than today. Most of the big companies have raised programs, and when there's quotas out there, and nearly all companies are actively looking for female talents who want to have a career, and so I don't think there's any good excuses not to make a career if you really want it. There's all the opportunities. When you become a mother, I think there it starts to be difficult. But let's be honest, very much because of our countries. I mean, we live we live the idea of family and how we care for families in a very different style than even France is very different, right?
Absolutely agree.
And also the Scandinavian countries are very different, or the US, right? There's just a different attitude and how they approach being a family, and who cares in a family about the kids, and how do you share responsibilities. And I think you can do a lot as a company. So we, for example, we push shared leadership, so that also, and it's not just females, but also male colleagues who want to have more time for their families, do that in part-time, but share, for example, leadership positions. And it's easy. Yeah.
Is it working? So how long? When did you introduce the concept of shared leadership?
So that we really have a significant number. It's now a bit more than 2 years, and so far we are super happy, and we would further push that. So that's, for example, something you can do as a company, and not let females down once they get pregnant. But I think it's also really important as a society to move forward and to think differently about having a family. To give you one example, what always is kind of amazing, right? There's this, I'm sure you have heard that before. There's a couple and the first baby comes. And then there's this discussion after 1 year. Oh, now when you go back into your job, all of your salary, dear mother, is then spent on childcare. Why is it the salary of the mother, right? Isn't that a crazy thought? I mean, it's the joint baby of a couple. And why do we think it's the salary of the mother that is spent on the daycare?
It comes back to the mindset.
It is all about the mindset, right? And couples who I know who manage that in a good way, they change their mindset. I think that's the one thing. The other thing, of course, politics. There has to be better daycare in our countries, but there has also been the acceptance that you're not a bad mother if you use daycare.
I cannot agree more.
There's still a lot also in our minds which has to change.
Yeah.
And there's not that one simple solution. And I just believe it's a process. And it has to do a lot with the mindset of what's a family and who has to care for a family in our Central Europe countries.
And at the end, of course, having more role models showing that it's possible.
Yeah.
And companies, as you rightly mentioned, who offer these opportunities.
Yeah.
So me in RBI, I need to admit this, as a mother in a management position, I was very happy to have the opportunity by the company with the facilities offered.
Yeah.
So it's possible, but one needs to want it. Yeah.
Probably you gave a little bit of a glimpse into Austrian and culture they're like. We know Austrian much longer than you are responsible for. So from a state company to strikes, all the discussions you have with unions, and they're like, how would you describe today Austrian, and how do you try to shape the culture of the group into the future, which is challenging to all of us?
Yeah. My focus clearly is to use the very, very good DNA of Austrians' strong core of hospitality and push that to the next level. Because also having a very good comparison to Lufthansa and Swiss in detail, but also to some other brands, I truly believe this is something very special, which is not easy to copy. This kind of warm-heartedness and being close to customers. Also, it's probably a bit easier if a bit smaller than, for example, being Lufthansa. And so this is something I really want to further leverage because, yes, today we're good, but are we at a level where we could be and should be? I think there's a lot of potential. So that's really the core of what we do. And I believe this is not something where you tell the employees be nicer to the customer, but it is something that has to be very deeply rooted in your culture. Just 2 days back, we reviewed in our board meeting our recruiting strategy and recruiting efforts of last year. And so 2 years back, we started to analyze and we said, well, if we want to be a true hospitality company, right, it has to start also there. How do you approach candidates? What's your experience during a hiring process? What's your experience during onboarding? And also when you, for example, in the onboarding phase, we come out of a culture where onboarding was done really just by expert group per expert group. The people didn't meet. And that was very much fostering silos. And I believe this is totally wrong. So we completely redesigned that experience of recruiting, of onboarding, getting people together early. And we can see that in our KPIs. So our ratings of how was your recruiting experience really jumped from, on a scale from 0 to 5, from a 3.7 to a 4.8. I think that it starts. How do you get into a company? The type of people you hire. What's the attitude towards hospitality? Right. When I hire someone, I ask myself, how would I feel if I was invited by that person for a dinner at home? And would I think this person would be a good host? And this is not just for cabin crews, but I believe in general, everyone in a company which wants to be famous for hospitality should have that kind of mindset. And so, of course, we're working a lot on also hospitality. How can we further push that for cabin crews? And they also enjoy that. They want to be good hosts, right? But I think it has to be very broad in the company. And so that's how we try to focus on culture work.
Customer orientation, huh?
I was thinking exactly the same. At the end, it's all about the people.
True.
Yeah. True. The face of the company. A last question from my side. Looking through, over the whole professional career of yours, is there the one guiding principle which you would like to share as an advice to our listeners?
I would say be curious, because I think you can only have a good management career if you remain curious and if you want to understand things and if you want to understand how everything fits together and where in a system you have to make changes to make the whole system better. And so I think it's this curiosity to understand complex systems. And that was always something I really liked. But basically, I think curiosity and always being willing to rethink, right? That's something I believe is really, really helpful. And probably especially for females, a few days back, I was asked what was the best advice you ever got. Probably it was, don't let anyone tell you how much and how many disadvantages you have in life because of you're a woman. Just do your thing. And so I tried to live that. I was never thinking too much about disadvantages because I'm a woman, right? And so if you don't think a lot about it, you don't feel it a lot. So.
I will remember, but particularly the second one, because I'm afraid, though it might be a cliche, but I'm afraid it's true that sometimes we overthink. Yeah. Just do. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Last one from my side, a little bit of an insight to you. You have an immense workload. I guess your schedule and your week is packed. How do you re-energize? What's your secret that you can share also with the audience here, that you get back your power in order to do your challenging job?
Well, first of all, it's absolutely helpful if you love your job, and I do love my job. So I'm not a big fan of the concept of work-life balance, but it's rather a blending. And I think as long as you're passionate about your job, it doesn't feel every hour like hard work, right? So that is absolutely helpful. Still, recharging is super important, and for me, it's being out in the nature. And this is also why we wanted to live a bit at the outskirts of Vienna, in a more green area, with a garden there, and so that's really being in nature. And whenever I have more free time, I'm out on the waters and go sailing.
Sailing.
Yes.
Very good. Annette, many thanks for your time. It was a pleasure having you.
Very insightful and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We wish you continued success in your challenging role in Austrian. And
I'm
we are
flying on Saturday with Austrian.
Fantastic.
Perfect. We are looking forward whenever we onboard there. That's a great experience. And thanks for the hospitality that your team is giving us in Raiffeisen as well. In case you're interested in further insights and stories of Central Eastern Europe, please tune in to our next episode on Banking on Success. Wish you a good day and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Raiffeisen Bank International. Make it happen.